Good day and welcome to the Networking for Career Development panel session. My name is Shemaine Tucker and I am the moderator for the panel today. As you're joining in, you'll see that we'll be in webinar mode, so you'll see the person who is speaking. So after I finish speaking, our panelist Eileen will speak and then you'll be able to see her. During the session, we will use the Q&A portion so you can add questions, and if you see a question that you want to have answered, you can do the upvoting, and also you can put questions in the chat and they will be answered either in the session or after the presentation is over. So it is my pleasure to introduce Eileen Theodore-Shusta, and she will be your presenter for networking.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're coming from. I'm Eileen Theodore-Shusta. As you can see on my screen, I'm a leadership development coach. And I also work at Ohio University Libraries in the Dean's Suite and manage our planning, assessment, and organizational effectiveness operations. I have a master's in library science, a master's in administration, and I'm a board certified coach. So I thought we would start by just I know that people are coming to this event from a variety of places and colleges and universities. So I thought we'd start by asking people to put in chat where you're from, the city you're from, or the university that you're working at, just so we get a feeling for where people are coming from. And I am going to start that by telling you that I am from Athens, Ohio, which is located 75 miles southeast of Columbus, Ohio. All right. So Athens, Ohio, this is my land acknowledgement. So I will start by acknowledging that Athens, Ohio is located in the traditional homelands of the Shawnee people, as well as the Osage Nation and the Adena, Hopewell, and Fort ancient cultures before them. The Ohio country, established by this in the 1797 Northwest Ordinance, was at that time a convergence zone of some 40 tribes, including the Mingo, Erie, Lenape, Wyandotte, Miami, and others who came to this area for their rich hunting grounds and the relative safety that these lands provided. According to the 1794 map by Thomas Kitchen, no settlement existed in the Athens area in the time immediately prior to the founding of the city. In 1795, after a decade of war with the US, leaders from a dozen sovereign nations were forced to sign the Treaty of Greenville and cede lands comprising the areas of eastern, southern, and central Ohio to the United States government. All right, today's objectives. We're going to talk about networking. And I hope that by the time we leave here, we'll have a better understanding of what is networking, why do we want to do networking, and maybe a little bit about how we do networking. So networking, it's a big idea, right? It's like people talk to you and they say, oh, you should do networking to be successful at your job and growing in your career. And in my mind, when people talk to me about networking, it used to be that this is the picture that I would have, where all these people were standing around and talking and interacting with each other. And this petrifies me, to be honest. Because, you know, I'm a little bit of an introvert. I don't really like talking to people I don't know well. I hate small talk. And honestly, I'm really not sure what I'm supposed to be gaining from standing in this room talking to a lot of people I don't know. I would tell you that that there have been times where I have literally walked into a room, seen this, and turned around and left. And that's not the way I want to present myself. And so what I started to do was to think about what is networking and to start doing some reading and exploring and interviewing people and finding out more about exactly what is networking. So I would tell you that this is more about what I see about networking and how I'd like you to start thinking about it. I think that one of the problems that we have about networking is the definition. What is it that people mean when they say networking? I would tell you, if you do a Google search for networking, you'll learn a lot about how computers work together and are connected in networks. So you have to be very, very persistent when you start doing your research around what is networking. So what is networking? I would tell you that networking is about meeting people. And we do networking in order to build connections, create a support system, and help you in terms of achieving your goals. In my research, this was a quote I came across. Networking is a lot like nutrition and fitness. We know what to do. The hard part is making it a top priority. And I'm not confident that we do know what to do when it comes to networking. If you don't, if you've never talked to anybody or you're not really sure how to do it, then this is something where I think that you need to stop and think, well, why do we do networking? So let's start with that. We're going to start with talking about the why, and then I think we'll work on talking about developing a plan, preparing, practicing. So let's start with the why. All right. Why do we network? There's a lot of reasons why we network. One thing I would talk to you about in terms of why we network is thinking in terms of building connections. So you start a new job, or you move into a new area of the library, or you take on new responsibilities within your job. How do you do that? A lot of that is going to be through connecting with the people that you're working with, finding out more about them. I'm not saying become someone's bosom buddy or best friend, but sometimes it's good to know something about where the person's coming from, what their responsibilities are, what challenges they're working on. This would be a way in which you can become better at your job. And it can also be within the profession. Sometimes getting to know somebody, where I work at, I'm the only person in that library who does what I do. So reaching out to others in the profession who do work that's similar to what I do have helped me to gain confidence and understanding of what my work responsibilities are. But I also say, when you're building these connections with work, don't just think in terms of the people you're working with in your unit or within your library, but also think about the advantages of learning about those people who you don't work with every day, but whose work that impacts your ability to do your job. So another reason we network would be to improve skills and understanding. I know I mentioned that just now, but sometimes it could be about gaining information. Something new comes along and somebody else knows about it or is an expert at it. Connecting with that person can help you to gain information or grow your skills, or even to identify what are the best practices in your field. It might be that networking helps you in terms of planning your future. And I don't mean like your own future in terms of goal setting or where you want to be in 10 years, but it could be about finding out what's happening in your profession. Where are things moving? What are people doing and experimenting with? And then finally, I think networking can be a way in which we can develop a support system. All of us need a support system. I think especially women need to think in terms of who are the people in your life that you could turn to and offer you support. And I would say talking about your colleagues, your friends, family members, but it also is really valuable for you to consider having a mentor and maybe having a sponsor. So what is a mentor? People talk about mentors a lot. Typically, a mentor is someone who is in your area of work or is working in an area that you'd like to be working in, but has more experience and can help you with sharing that experience as you're encountering new things. It's typically a formal relationship. I mean, if you said to somebody, this person is my mentor, that's something you've agreed to have that. So it's a formal relationship. What does a mentor do? That person meets with you on a regular basis, offers advice based on their experience, and the two of you work together to create a relationship that's based on trust and confidentiality. Confidentiality with the mentor or mentee is really important so that you feel comfortable with opening up and sharing and being a little vulnerable. So more and more, one of the things that something I've been hearing about a lot in the literature and in my readings is the idea of having a sponsor. So what is a sponsor? A sponsor is someone who advocates for you. Usually there's someone who's more senior, could be in your organization or could be within the profession. It may be your supervisor's supervisor. It's typically an informal relationship. You may not even know that somebody is sponsoring you. What does a sponsor do? A sponsor can provide introductions. They can open doors and break down barriers. It can be a way for people of color to move forward and break through barriers in an organization by having someone sponsor them. And the primary thing a sponsor can do would be to represent your interests when they're meeting in meetings that you're not invited to. I found this video and I wanted to share it with you. It should only take a few minutes.
Eileen, we're not hearing the audio.
You're not hearing the audio?
No, I think if you're using your headphones, then you may need to either unplug your headphones and then also make sure you check that you had the video setting in Zoom.
Try this.
And then in the meantime, I'll drop the URL in the chat so people can follow up with.
All right. I'm sorry about that. Can you hear it now?
Yes.
I sort of think about it in 3 dimensions. There's coaching, there's mentoring, and there's sponsorship or sponsoring. A sponsor is someone who talks about you in rooms where you are not present, in decision-making places where you are not present. They are advocating for you. They are actually using their own professional capital to help propel your career forward.
More recently, people have pushed away from talking about mentorship and moved more toward talking about sponsorship, because that's not about what can the individual person do, how can we coach them to fix themselves or dress differently or all those kinds of things, but how can we as an organization, as individuals in the organization, actually promote, sponsor, and enable the career success.
It's this concept of having a champion, somebody who leans in and advocates for you and creates opportunities, someone senior to you, and basically allows you to demonstrate your ambition, your drive, your intellect, your capabilities, so that you are ready for the next role.
Sponsorship is really about promoting someone's skills, talents, and ability.
providing cover if they mess up, because junior people are going to mess up. But you have to go through those growing pains, and it's really helpful to have someone who is there for you, because you're going to do great things and you're also going to have slips, and sponsorship can provide backup when those things do happen.
To me, it's action, not just listening and talking and advice. It's personally reaching in and intervening at key moments. Perhaps even unnaturally pushing them into a next role when maybe they didn't even feel ready. I absolutely do that and look for those opportunities.
That it's what people say about you, behind closed doors. They advocate for you. They're speaking for your behalf and about you when you're not there. I think often it happens and you're not even aware of it.
When I first came to Canada in 2005, I was like a fish out of water. Sponsorship has transformed my life 360 degrees. The one thing I would say, Tanya, thank you for holding my hands and showing me the way, and really, really, really taking me to the next step.
The same way. So
I'm really tearing up.
All right. Hold on a second.
Great. I wanted to mention too that in some of the articles that I've read, mentoring and sponsoring can be overlapping. Your mentor can sponsor you. Your sponsor can mentor you. So, but I wanted to separate those two things so that you understand that there actually are two different approaches to having people in your lives that support you in what you're working to achieve. One of the things that I've been talking to people about with networking is the idea of creating an inner circle. I've also heard this referred to as your personal board of directors in a business setting. So the people that you might identify as being in your inner circle should be people that you trust, people who will be honest with you, who will tell you when maybe you've screwed up a little bit and you need to have somebody say, oh, you might want to consider doing this a little differently next time. And people who will challenge you to step out of your comfort zone and try new things. So what I'm going to have you do, we're going to pause here and do a quick exercise for determining, who is in your inner circle. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to grab a sheet of paper and draw a circle and make 4 intersecting lines to make 8 sections. And you could add more sections, obviously. So think of this I've heard this referred to as a wheel of life, and it represents the different aspects of your life, your family, your friends, your community, where you work, what your profession. But make sure that one of the sections would be for a mentor and one is for a sponsor. And now I'm going to ask you to add 1 to 2 names to each section in your circle. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to run through and do this little exercise. All right. So I don't know about you, but when I sit down and do this exercise, I find that there are areas where I may struggle a little bit in terms of thinking about somebody who meets all the criteria of belonging to my inner circle. People in each category. Is there someone in my family that I trust? Are there friends that I turn to and can expect them to challenge me? Who at work could I talk to and feel like I can talk in a way that's kept confidential? These are important components to who would be in your inner circle. So I would challenge you to think, if there are areas where you don't have even one person identified, this might be time for you to think about who in that category might you turn to. And it may be that you don't have 8 different people in your inner circle. Maybe you have 5. But 5 solid people that you can turn to support you is a great thing. So now what I would like you to do with this circle that we've created is, over the next week or two, I'd like you to approach each of the people that you've identified in your circle and talk to them about the support that you would like to get from them, and that you would like to think of them as being in your inner circle. All right. So we've talked about what is networking, and we've talked about why do we network. I think it's also important to think in terms of how do we network, because again, I don't think we all know how to do this. And I don't think it's really just a matter of showing up at a party and talking to someone you don't know and hoping that you don't make a total fool of yourself. So I think that being successful at networking is exactly the same thing as being successful in any project that you take on at work. You don't just step out and do it. Maybe you do, but I don't. So this is my suggestion for how you might approach networking. I think you start by setting goals. I think it's important to have a plan, to do your research, and to prepare. And every step of the way, I think it's important that we practice. So the first thing I would talk about is in terms of setting goals. You see here a picture of what SMART goals are, and we hear about people talk about SMART goals a lot. But I think, you know what I think of when I think of SMART goals, I really think of them as being action steps. I think that we start by thinking about our long-term goals. And I would say that what you would want to do is to develop a vision of what your ideal future would look like. What does your world look like 10 years from now? Are you going to be the director of a library? Are you still going to be working in the library profession? Are you going to be an stay-at-home parent? What is your ideal future looking like? And don't think in terms of, well, I ought to do this or I should do that, but think of, in an ideal world, this is the person I will be in 5, 10 years. That's your big goal. So what I would say was figure out what your big goal is, and then stop and chunk that out, because, you know, to get from here to there is a big step. It's a lot easier if we break it down into small steps. And this is, I think, where SMART goals come in, because they are specific and they're measurable and hopefully they're attainable. So I would strongly recommend that before you do anything in terms of making changes in your life or achieving your long-term goals, start thinking in terms of, what's the first thing that I could do right now that might help me move in that direction that I want to go in. So SMART goals are specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're reasonable, and they're time limited. I mean, it's not a goal that you say, I'm going to do this in the next 10 years. It's like, what am I going to do in the next 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months? I think the next thing you do is you plan. And you start planning by identifying networking opportunities. These are some networking opportunities that I think of and I wanted to just talk with you about a little bit here. So presentations like this, right? You go to a presentation, you go to a conference, you listen to somebody talking. Maybe the person who's talking is talking to you about something that really resonates with you and you would like to talk with that person some more. That's networking. Maybe you go to a training. Everybody in the room at that training is there to learn the same thing you are. So you all have that in common. There are a lot of times at work where we're asked to consider serving on a committee. And it's like, oh, one more thing to serve on, one more commitment on my time. But I would challenge you to think of serving on committees as a way of building your network. Everyone in that room will have in common that experience of serving on a committee. And that's something that you can connect with. When I first started working at Ohio University, I didn't know anybody. I moved there from a totally different part of the country. Somebody suggested to me that at Ohio University, librarians are administrators, and we have an administrative senate. And somebody said to me, there's a committee in administrative senate that's looking for new members. Well, I thought, I could do that. So I joined that committee, and I met 6 people in that committee who didn't work in the library, who didn't know anything about libraries, but they worked in different areas of the university. And to this day, I still know those people, and I can reach out to those people and ask them questions about what might be going on in their area. And I had that connection. So networking in that sense can be just serving on a committee. Attending professional events like a conference. Typically in a conference, there will be roundtable discussions. There's one scheduled for this afternoon, I think, or tomorrow afternoon. I don't remember. But this is an opportunity for you to get together in a room with other people who are similar to you, who have similar interests or concerns. Community meetups are a great place to meet people. So yesterday afternoon, there was a session that covered communities of practice for new managers. Everybody in that group connected with each other. They talked a lot in their presentation about building on the network. They might not have called it that, but that's what I thought of when I heard them describe the benefit of being in that community of practice. Joining service organizations. I'm a member of the International Rotary Group. There's a local chapter that I belong to, and that's a way for me to connect. Religious and spiritual groups. You have a common interest with the people in that group, a common understanding of how life works. This is a great way in which to build a network. Something that I know a little bit about because I'm a coach is the idea of peer coaching. And actually the community of practice that was described last night, I would think of as being more of a form of peer coaching, where everyone comes together and works together to help each other succeed. Even social events can be a networking opportunity. Are there other things that you could think of that would be a way to do networking opportunities? All right, so we live in a virtual world now. There might be a light at the end of the tunnel, but we still are meeting virtually, and I think we will for quite a while. So how do we network in a virtual world? Well, I would say that you should remember that all of us are doing the same thing. We're all struggling with how do we connect with people while working at home. So one thing you could do is think about opportunities where you have met with people in the past, people that you used to work with, people you haven't talked to in a while. Reach out and ask them if they'd like to have a meeting where you for coffee, and you each bring your own favorite beverage with you, and you just talk and connect and get back in contact with somebody that you haven't talked to in a while. Maybe you read an article and you find that the author, or you hear a presentation and you think of the speaker, is talking about something that you are very interested in, would like to learn more about, maybe reach out to that person and ask them if they'd like to meet. Most people love to talk about themselves or about their own research interests. So this would be something that I think most people would say yes to. It could be that you're the one who sets up a networking opportunity by reaching out and inviting several people who have similar interests to you for a happy hour. And you get together the late afternoon or early evening, and you organize the conversation. And maybe you tell people beforehand that there will be a theme, a conversation point. Maybe you come prepared with 2 or 3 questions and ask everybody to respond. I would tell you, if you do something like this, you probably want to keep the group small, maybe no more than 5 or 6 people. So everyone has a chance to participate. Look for networking opportunities such as discussion groups. I belong to the ACRL, HR, and OD discussion group. We meet every Friday for an hour and just talk about what's happening in our world. And it is a great networking opportunity. I have met people, I've talked to them in ways that I wasn't able to do when we were meeting face to face. Again, there are ways that you can set something up. Maybe you can create a book study group or a journal club where you all read the same article and talk about what you read. You could schedule an office hours and share with everyone you can think of your the URL to your meeting and just say, I'm going to be available every Friday at this time. Here's the URL. If you want to talk, just go ahead and join in. We'll be there. Everyone's looking for ways in which to connect, and this would be a great way. There are a lot of advantages to networking virtually. It's unlimited geographically. So where before, if you wanted to meet with somebody for coffee, it had to be somebody who lived in the same town as you. You could meet for coffee with somebody on the other side of the world, as long as you can set it up and get it on their calendar. It's much more affordable. I mean, one of the options I talked about was going to a conference and joining a roundtable or a discussion group. Well, that only works if you can afford to go to that conference, to fly there and stay in a hotel and pay for your meals and register. So now we can do it virtually, and it's accessible and it's affordable, and all those barriers are removed. Meeting platforms, right? There's so many different ways in which we could meet. Right now we're doing Zoom. At my university, we use Teams. You can do Google Meet. You can do Facebook Messenger has at meeting rooms. There's so many different ways in which you can set up opportunity to talk and meet. There are a variety of ways in which we can meet virtually, as I've pointed out in the previous slide. I think the real thing, though, is that I think it tends to be more genuine and more personal when you're meeting in a virtual room like this. All right. I think that an important step in doing network is to do research. As librarians, we understand the value of research. You know, if you're going to a conference, look to see who else is registered, who's attending, who are the speakers. If you're interested in it, you heard a speaker that you liked, look and see what they've written, what their articles are. Do they have a web page? Do they have a LinkedIn profile? Learn more about them so you're prepared to have a conversation about what they're interested in. And maybe even look at who's sponsoring an event so that you could maybe reach out to them and say, this is an area that I'm interested in and I would like to learn more about and meet more people. And I'm wondering if you might be able to help me with connecting. So there's a lot of ways in which doing the research beforehand can really make the experience a valuable experience. All right. Another step in the way, I think, is to prepare. I think that we stumble a lot in terms of networking if we don't stop and prepare beforehand. So we're planning and we're doing research, and now we're preparing. So two things I would say. One is it would be really important to think in terms of creating your elevator speech to introduce yourself, and also to think it beforehand and have some questions prepared. So here's another little exercise I thought we would do. Just take a few seconds here. I'm going to ask you all to take a moment to write out what your elevator speech might be. Now remember, an elevator speech is something that can take 30 to 60 seconds. The intent would be that you meet somebody as you get into the elevator, and you have the trip to the bottom floor to tell somebody who you are. So keep it short and sweet, focus on the essentials, and be positive. So here's a little template you can use. Just, hello, my name is, I am, and tell them what your job title is or what your profession is. And then what is it you do? I help by, and then what are my credentials? So I've written out my elevator speech below as an example. And this works for me, but it may be something that you want to focus on as a little different in your elevator speech. But it's important that you write out your elevator speech beforehand and that you practice it so that you're not stumbling over it when somebody meets you. Where you can say, hi, I'm Eileen. I'm a coach. I help people figure out what their goals are and what action steps they need to take to reach those goals. It's pretty short and simple. The other thing I would ask you to do is to think before you go as to like, what are the questions that you might ask? And this would be a point where you would stop and you would go back again and you think, what is it you're hoping to achieve? What is your long-term goal? What are your action steps? What research have you done? And using that information, develop some goals. And these are goals these are questions that I use here. But honestly, I would tell you, if you stop and meet somebody and they introduce themselves and then you introduce yourself, in that little bit of an introduction, you're going to learn something about that person, something that you could maybe ask a question about. So if you met me and I said, I'm a leadership coach, maybe your question could be, can you explain to me a little bit more about what is a coach? What does a coach do? That's a question that goes right to me talking about what I do. And I would tell you that when you meet people, I would say 60% of the people you meet are probably extroverts and love to talk about themselves. The large portion of librarians tend to be introverts and are good at listening. So take advantage of that if you're an introvert. Ask people questions and take the time to listen, and and actively listen. Don't be thinking about what are you going to say next when they finish, but listen carefully to what they're saying, and that will help you think about what would be the next question that you might ask. But if you have someone who's an introvert that you're meeting with and they're not really comfortable with sharing, maybe you want to have one or two questions that is in your back pocket, as it were, that you might reach out and say, can you tell me about what was your biggest win for you in the last 6 months? Or It could even be, we're all working remotely. What is it that you've gained from this experience? And what has been the most challenging part of it for you? It'll be interesting to hear what the responses are, but if you have those questions already thought through and planned for, you don't stumble as much, and you have something that you can bring to that conversation. So I think that the last next thing I would say in terms of preparing for networking is the whole idea of visualizing success. And people who play sports do this. They can visualize, what does it look like to kick that field goal? What does it look like to hit that home run? They visualize it beforehand, and it is a powerful, powerful tool for success. So take the moment beforehand to stop and say, what is success? What is it that you want to achieve? What does it look like? How does success feel? And how are you going to get there? If you take just that second to think about that beforehand, then I think you will be much more successful at networking. So what I have found out in my work in terms of networking, the way to be successful at networking is planning, preparing, and practicing. But I really think the most important part of success is persevering. All right, thank you. I think we're ready. I'm ready to take questions if anyone had any questions or comments.
So Eileen, right now we have a question in our Q&A. An attendee asks, what are meaningful ways to ask someone to sponsor you if that relationship isn't a natural outgrowth of your current relationship? Mm-hmm. It feels like a big ask, especially if your supervisor may not want you to have that sort of relationship with their supervisor.
I think that sometimes, you don't want to be meeting with someone you've never met before, but it may be that it's more that you want to start doing some networking. And so I don't think you start with asking someone to be your sponsor, but you might start by reaching out to other people in the organization, maybe not your supervisor or your supervisor's supervisor, but maybe it's somebody in a different division of the library, and you've been on a committee where they chaired the committee, and you were interested in learning more about something that happened there. Reach out, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to reach out to that person and say, I would like to set up a meeting and talk to you about the committee that we served on, or this project that we worked on together. And then I would say that, working with somebody on a project, if there's an opportunity to volunteer to work on a project, step up and ask if you might be able to help with some aspect of that project. I think that one of the ways to develop a relationship with people who are more senior in your organization is by being available and demonstrating that you're willing to take on responsibilities. I served on a committee. I was approached by a president of LAMA at one point and asked to serve on a committee, the membership committee, and I was really surprised. I had not been working at that level in the organization at all, but the president of the division said that she had served on committees with me in the past and found me to be somebody who is willing to make commitments and follow through. And so she knew she could count on me to follow through if I made a commitment. And I think that is a way in which you can develop a reputation as being somebody that people can rely on, that you can that they can be confident that you're going to be someone they can rely on. And at that point, then, you can then say, if you're meeting with somebody and you're talking to them about a project that you're working on, or an area that you're interested in, you could say to them, I understand that you work at a different level in the organization than I do, and I'm interested in taking on more responsibilities. So I'm wondering if I might ask you, if you see an opportunity that could be available for me, would you be willing to volunteer my name? It's pretty straightforward, I think, but you start by developing the relationship and making yourself known as somebody that is good at what you do and is available to help work on projects, or maybe step a little bit out of your comfort zone. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome, thank you. We have another question from what looks to be kind of the other end of things.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, an attendee asks, I'm someone who has been approached by individuals.
Well, I know there's a lot there. And my contact information is available on the screen, and this has been recorded. So if you would have any other questions you'd like to ask me or connect with me, please feel free to reach out and we will network. All right. You all have a great afternoon, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's sessions.
Eileen, there's a few more questions from the chat.
Yeah. Eileen, can you hear me?
Eileen, are you able to hear us? Eileen?